Welcome to the Permanent Change of Station podcast, a place where friends can come together, agree or disagree, and still be friends. Join attorney and Forever Miss Oregon, Lynette Perez, each week as she covers such topics as law, relationships, faith, and current events. No matter the issue, Lynette believes it's time for a permanent change of station.
This is Lynette, and welcome to another edition of Permanent Change of Station, a place where friends can come together, agree or disagree on any topic, and still be friends. Recently, I interviewed a outstanding young woman who is actually just turning 40, who is receiving her bachelor's degree at age 40 from Boise State University. And she, throughout the podcast, mentioned how I had inspired her in my own walk. And I just wanted to share, for those of you that didn't know much of my history or testimony on that subject, I became a lawyer at the age of 48. When I was about 44 years old, I had been elected in Clark County, Nevada, had lost my election in 2006, had gone through a divorce, just was going through a lot of personal turmoil, to say the least. And I decided that I needed to just make a break. And so in 2008, I literally called up one of my friends who had been my friend since I was 12 years old and said, "Hey, Leslie, do you want to drive with me from Las Vegas to San Antonio, where my parents had been living since the 90s? After they had returned from living in Europe, they had invited me to come home. And for the longest time, I had resisted coming home. I literally didn't know what I was going to do for the rest of my life, but I knew something had to give. And so Leslie said yes. I literally scooped her up at McCarran International Airport in Las Vegas, and we took off blazing on Interstate 10, Thelma and Louise style, heading in the direction of San Antonio. And I do remember when arriving, my father, the very first time, he saw me there in San Antonio, he was in the garage and I was getting something out of my car, walking it into the house. And he said to me that you may not know, and I don't know why God has said for you to come to San Antonio at this time in this season in your life, but I have no doubt that God will reveal it all to you. And I kid you not, in 2008, I had zero clue what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And so as the weeks unfolded and as I got a little more settled, I started asking God that question, what is it that you would want me to do now? I'm at a crossroads. So what direction should I go? And God reminded me that 20 years earlier, I had been accepted to every law school in the state of Oregon. I had been accepted to Lewis and Clark, I had been accepted to Willamette, and I had been accepted to the University of Oregon Law School. But I did not go. And there were two reasons why I didn't go, which today, as I'm about to turn 59 this summer, sound almost crazy, but that was my reality in the early 90s. One, I was involved in a relationship in which the person was planning to become a F-16 fighter pilot in the United States Air Force. And in my 20-something-year-old mindset then, I thought that, him becoming a fighter pilot, what could be more important than I'm doing than that? And so I put his career aspirations ahead of my own. And then the second thing was I had two older siblings who not only were already lawyers, but they were very successful lawyers at that. Even in the early 90s, my sister had already been a White House attorney. She had been a partner in a law firm. She had been the number 2 attorney at Dell, and she eventually became the general counsel of Starbucks, a position she held for a decade. My brother, who had worked for Anheuser-Busch in St. Louis, went on, became the general counsel of Coors Brewing Company, and then became the general counsel for another, Fortune 500 company, Dow Corning. And so there had just been tremendous success in the law in my own family. And so, I didn't think there was anything I could do to compete with that or whatnot. Again, that was kind of my mindset then. But God gave me a dream. And in that dream, I was having a purple mantle placed on my shoulders. And I didn't know what the dream meant, but it was very vivid to me. This purple mantle was being placed on my shoulders, and it was actually being placed on my shoulders by the person who was my pastor at the time, Pastor Paul Goulet. And so I didn't fully understand the purpose of that dream, but I knew that color was purple. And I knew that color was a very important color to me, and that was the color of my high school. And also my favorite book is The Color Purple. In fact, I was so inspired by the book, The Color Purple, that I named my own children after the children of Miss Seeley in that book, Adam and Olivia. And so, again, the color purple was very prominent color in my life, but I didn't know really what the dream meant. So I decided to apply to law school. It was like this was going to be a Jonah in the whale type of experience, that God had given me that vision when I was in my 20s. And literally for the 20 years that I had deviated from going to law school, going down another path, every job I had, especially when I worked in government, I could not get away from working with lawyers. Every job, single job I had, I constantly had to work with lawyers. In fact, many people thought I was a lawyer because I knew so much about the law and contracts and that type of thing, but I was not a lawyer. And so God continued to download those things for me. And I took most of 2008 prepping for the LSAT. I took the LSAT. I then began applying to law schools, and I got accepted to law school and decided, given the options and the fact that I was a single mother and would need support from my parents throughout this journey, that I opted to stay local and to attend the law school there in San Antonio, which was St. Mary's University. And I was age 45 when I began that journey. I was the oldest woman in my section. I think I was oldest woman actually eventually in my law school graduating class. I was older than many of the law professors that I had, but I had a experience level that, having worked in government especially, I just had a different appreciation of the law, and especially areas such as criminal law, torts, constitutional law were always those that were my favorite things. Now, while I was awaiting my law school decisions, I worked for the Judson Independent School District as a substitute teacher. I wanted to have a job that gave me flexibility while I was preparing for law school. And that was my first connection with the Judson Independent School District. And it was through that experience that I learned that working with children, working for children, was something that I was deeply passionate about. I asked God, I said, show me, what area of law could possibly be more valuable to society, but more valuable to you than any of the worldly success that my siblings had experienced. And it became crystal clear that it was to serve children. And for the first decade or so of my legal career, a good part of my practice was representing children charged with crime in the juvenile courts. And I also was a child welfare attorney representing children who unfortunately were caught up in the CPS system because of the abuse and or neglect of a parent. And that just became my joy. And I can tell you that now as a prosecutor, I get to represent, both adults, but also children who are the victims of crime. And that has been very satisfying as well. I knew again from the beginning that if God allowed me 3 more years to become a lawyer, that I was going to either be 48 with a law degree or 48 without a law degree. And I just chose to do that. And so I just want to encourage anyone that is thinking of going back to school. It is never too late. In fact, I gained so much being in class with people who were 15 to 20 years younger than myself. Many of them are very close to me to this very day. And having gone through law school with that generation actually has given me a lot of hope for humanity. That millennial generation often gets a bad rap, but I can tell you that they are passionate about the type of world that we live in, what type of society that all of us may be facing in the future, and are just class act people and some of the best lawyers I know. And so I feel that the perfect timing was not in my 20s. It was for such a time as this. And many people that know my story from Las Vegas and some of the drama that I went through, that eventually I prevailed over in the criminal justice system. I have been charged with offenses associated with the 2006 election, but at the end of the day, I prevailed. And justice, I should say, prevailed is probably an even better way of putting it. And I often reflect back when I was going back, criminal courts or to divorce court or whatever the case may be, how I, at the time, back in 2006, 2007, thought that was a curse. But in 2022, I can say unequivocally that it was a blessing because I had a front row seat. I learned courtroom advocacy by being able to observe courtroom lawyers, to see how they handled objections, how they argued, how they knew the rules of evidence. All of that I learned as being a client of some attorney. And so those words of Joseph in the book of Genesis hold true for me. And at the end of that story of Joseph, he talks about how you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is being done today, the saving of many lives. And I have no doubt that was part of the journey. And I finally learned the meaning of that purple stole that was placed on my shoulders, because on graduation, that purple stole, that's the color that no matter what law school you attend in America, the one commonality at commencement is that you will be cloaked in a purple hood, academic hood. That's part of your academic regalia. That's what distinguishes you as a lawyer. But for me, the significance of having my pastor was just a way of God showing me that this was going to be a ministry for me, that power of impartation, that I was going to be able to serve God by serving people as an advocate of the law, that God was going to give me a new name, one of his, Wonderful Counselor. That is one of his names. And in many ways, I think many people don't even realize that one of the greatest hymns of all times, "It Is Well With My Soul," was written by a lawyer. This lawyer had been a Chicago lawyer. Mr. Attorney Spafford was his name. And he had already lost his home in the Chicago fire. And he had already lost a child at that time to scarlet fever. And because his family had been going through so much, he decided to send his wife and his daughters to attend a revival. He was a man of faith, and his family was active in the church. He decided to send them to England for this revival. And so the wife and daughters took off on the first ship, and he was going to meet up with them several days later in England. And as the wife and daughters journeyed across the Atlantic, a few days into that journey, he received a telegram, a distress call, an emergency, that there had been a shipwreck at sea, that his wife survived, but all of his daughters had drowned in the Atlantic. And so Attorney Spafford got on the next available ship to be able to console his grieving wife and in dealing with its own grief because of this profound tragedy that had affected his family. And when he got on his own ship journey, the captain of his ship, when it got to the spot of that previous shipwreck that had claimed the lives of his daughters, that captain showed him where that had occurred. And so Attorney Spafford went back to his cabin and he penned these words: "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrow like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul." Those words can be found in my law office, and they inspire me each and every day. And I hope just sharing a little bit about my journey as to how I got to becoming a lawyer at the age of 58, or 48, I should say. I'm 58 now, about to turn 59, will inspire someone out there to consider that it's not too late for them, and may it be well with your soul. This is Lynette signing off with Permanent Change of Station.
You've been listening to Permanent Change of Station. Tune in each week for the latest episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. You can find PCS Podcast online at pcspodcast.live and on social media. And while you're at it, don't forget to rate, subscribe, and leave a review. This helps others find the show, and we really appreciate it. We'll catch you in the next episode.